So welcome to our evening Dharma talk. And tonight I'd like to give a Dharma talk about the 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing as expounded by the Buddha in the Ānāpānasati sutta. And there's 16 steps and I've got 15 minutes, so actually I've got less than 15 minutes now. So we'll see how we can go. Now, this sutta is based on a discourse given by the Buddha at the end of a 4-month retreat. And the Buddha was very pleased with the progress of everyone. And in the audience, there were lots of monastics. And some of them were highly realized, highly achieved, well practiced. And when the Buddha gave this discourse, he said, this is one way I practice mindfulness of breathing. It's not the only way, but it's one way. And he said that mindfulness of breathing was his preferred practice. So it's pretty significant. So the first talk I gave in this, if you want to call it a series, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I gave a talk on the Four Noble Truths. Then the next week, I gave a talk on the Eightfold Path. And then the next week, which is last time I gave a talk, it was on the differences and similarities and how they support one another of serenity and insight aspects of meditation. So I thought it was fitting today to give a talk on how a practice can interweave these two approaches of serenity and insight. Because the 16 steps of mindfulness, of breathing are a beautiful example of how insight and serenity work together. So 16 steps, 4 tetrads, 4 steps, 4 tetrads. And a tetrad is a set of 4. And these 4 tetrads roughly correlate with the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So the first tetrad roughly correlates with mindfulness of breathing, mindfulness of body. The second tetrad roughly correlates with mindfulness of feelings. The third tetrad roughly correlates with mindfulness of mind, or the establishment of mind, contemplation of mind. And the fourth tetrad correlates with mindfulness of Dhammas. And there's another overlay too. In the sutta, the Buddha describes how there's a kind of an overlap with the 7 factors of awakening. And the 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation of Dhammas, energy or effort, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So the first tetrad, we find the first 3 factors, mindfulness, investigation of Dhammas, and energy. The second tetrad, we find joy and tranquility. The third tetrad, we find samadhi or concentration and equanimity. And the fourth tetrad's a different story. I'll get to the fourth tetrad in a little while. So the first tetrad, as it relates to mindfulness of body, the first 2 steps relate to investigation of Dhammas and mindfulness. So you establish, in those first 2 steps, we're being present with the breathing. We're knowing that we're breathing. And we're investigating and comprehending how we're breathing, whether it's long or short or rough or smooth or whatever it is. So, in fact, those first 2 steps are the only steps that we focus fully on the breathing. Then the next 2 steps, the third and the fourth step. The third step is about becoming aware of a body, becoming aware of bodily sensations. The breathing is in the background and the body is in the foreground. The fourth step is related to, it's called calming bodily activity. In other words, relaxing. So you're relaxing. And the breathing is in the background again, and the focus is on relaxing the body. So that's the first tetrad. And something that I want to mention here, because it's not actually mentioned in this sutta, it's not actually mentioned here, but it's kind of implied. There's something about gladness and spiritual pleasure. Because when I do this first tetrad, I start to feel pretty good. When I'm relaxing, I'm having a spiritual pleasure. So there is in the sutras, it says the proximal cause for gladness, which is a kind of a satisfaction and a pleasure, is a proximal cause for joy. So I think implied here with this relaxation is a sense of spiritual pleasure, is a sense of gladness, it's a sense of satisfaction. So that leads on to the fifth step, which is the first step of the second tetrad, which is joy. Breathing in, breathing out, joy. We allow joy to arise. Joy is the proximal cause for happiness. So the sixth step is happiness. Happiness and joy are a little bit different. Joy is more bubbly and it's actually piety, this kind of energetic, light sensation of upliftment. Joy, rapture is sometimes called. Happiness is more subtle. Happiness, or sukha, is a kind of a nice feeling in your heart. It's a kind of a lightheartedness, a buoyancy of your heart. So joy is the proximal cause for happiness. Then the sixth step is breathing in, breathing out, we experience happiness. The breathing is in the background, happiness is in the foreground. So that fulfills the joy component of those seven factors of awakening. Then that segues into the seventh and the eighth step of mindfulness of breathing. The seventh step is about becoming aware of mental activity, thoughts, mental activity, thoughts, impulses, and so on. The eighth step is then allowing mental activity to calm down. Because we become aware of thinking or mental activity, and we're not feeding into it, we're not doing anything with it, we're allowing it to settle into its own natural state. We're allowing it to calm down. So the eighth step is calming mental activity. Now, I think in the last guided meditation I talked about the ninth step, and I invited you to practice the ninth step, which is called experiencing mind. Now we're working into the third tetrad, the ninth step. It's experiencing mind. And when mental proliferations calm down, when they sort of settle down, what we're left with is the raw experience of knowing, the naked experience of knowing. Knowing the mind, like the mind knowing itself, which is quite amazing. Well, it's not amazing, it's profound. I think this is the aim of many spiritual practices. I think in Advaita like to talk about this, and there's a number of ways of looking at this, but essentially it is being present with the mind, the raw experience of knowing. So I think in Zen Buddhism it's called pure knowing or pure awareness. And as a result of this, we have something which it segues onto the next step. which is called Ānāpānasati. Abhi means superior, pamoja means gladness. So it's a superior gladness. It's a kind of a, when you experience the mind in its raw state, there's a sort of awesomeness, there's a feeling of awe. You know, it's more than just common gladness. It's a really fulfilling awesomeness. So this is superior gladness. And the next step, this is interesting because, you know, what we have with gladness and spiritual pleasure, the Buddha said not to be afraid of spiritual pleasure, by the way. What we have with gladness and spiritual pleasure is the proximal causes for samadhi, or concentration. So the 9th, 10th, 11th step then is samadhi. You're dropping into a still space, a silent space, a deeply quiet space. You could call it a jhana if you wish, but it's this quiet space. Whatever it is for you, it is the coming together of mental activities and settling them into one spot, settling. And then the next step is, it's called freeing the mind or liberating the mind. So we're up to the 12th step now. And in this place, you can go either two ways. You can use serenity approach to liberate your mind, or you could use an insight approach to liberate your mind. And when I learned these in mindfulness of breathing from Analayo, he talked about liberating your mind with an insight approach, and that was by recognizing the conceit I am, the ego, and just dropping it. And finding how liberating that is. It's like letting go of this horrible burden. So that's the 12th step. And this tetrad, the third tetrad, fulfills the enlightenment factors of, the awakening factors of concentration and equanimity. Now, the factors, these first three tetrads are a mix of kind of insight and serenity. Now we're coming to the fourth tetrad, the final steps. It's completely insight. Completely insight. Now, where are we? 13th step is about anicca, recognizing impermanence, seeing impermanence, perceiving impermanence. And there are, of course, three universal characteristics of existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca, impermanence; dukkha, unsatisfactoriness; and anatta, not self. And in this particular practice, we focus on the impermanence component. So with impermanence, when we see the impermanence of things, of life, ourselves, the khandha, the five aggregates, everything, it brings about a dispassion. A dispassion, which means a cooling off of craving. We don't crave after things because we see their unsatisfactory nature, because they're impermanent. So this is the 14th step, dispassion. And with dispassion, when we have dispassion, we no longer feed into, when we see an object arise, we no longer have craving after that object. So an object will arise and pass away, and it will cease. It will, there'll be a cessation in the continuation of craving to perpetuate things. So that is the 15th step. So with these last four steps, it's impermanence, dispassion, cessation. So there's a cessation of craving. That's primarily what we're talking about here. When there's a cessation of craving, there's a cessation of grasping, clinging, becoming, birth, aging, sickness, death, ignorance, and so on. It's short-circuiting that whole dependent arising cycle. And the last step is called letting go, which is, I guess, one could say that's stepping into Nibbana. So here we have 16 steps of mindfulness of breathing, a beautiful practice, focuses on impermanence. It's an interweaving of both the serenity and insight aspects of meditation, and it finally results in liberation, freedom of heart, with cessation and letting go. So thank you very much. I trust this Dharma talk was helpful, and I hope to see you again. Perhaps next week, I'm not sure. Thank you.